Hello, I didn't see you there. Please come in and learn about some posters and advertising. So, as we saw with the editorial cartoon, people are reaching um, a big audience through different modes now. And a lot of the stuff is very controversial. If you can imagine, the government wanting to uh, dictate a certain message to get everybody on board with something, uh, and then you have people doing these editorial cartoons, doing artwork that are subverting that message, then it becomes a little troublesome for the government. So what happens is that people start going through alternative methods as they were being censored to show, to get their art out, get their word out, so that when the government wants to say you can't do that, they can only control so much. So they're finding these alternative means to skirt the system, essentially. And what we're seeing is that is done primarily through, posters, advertisements, and even the modern equivalent, which would be memes. So let's begin. America is devouring its children. Um, you're going to see this misspelling of America in music, you're going to see it in the posters, and it's always in a very critical way. Um, that it's kind of supposed to be more of a fascist, oppressive spelling. It's supposed to seem a little, and this sounds awful, it's supposed to seem a little German and reminiscent of Nazis. But you'll also see that it's spelled with the K, kind of reminiscent of the KKK, and bringing about all of kind of the negative aspects of American life. So, what you see here is a screen print of an interpretation of Saturn Devouring His Own Children by Francisco Goya. And it's done with the red, white, and blue, obviously. And very straightforward. America's devouring its own children, saying, hey, we're sending the kids off to war. They're getting slaughtered, and all for what? A lot of this is really questioning the um, the whole purpose of wars. This becomes extremely popular in the Vietnam War, but it really uh, has its start with publications like the Masses in the early 1900s. But in the 30s, there's also this big anti-war movement, and what we're seeing is through the Peaceways project, World Peaceways, that they're taking out advertisements. And the government can't silence them on that. They're paying for these advertisements, and they are promoting this message. And these really freaking grim advertisements that were in things like, let's see, Esquire. You would see them in Time magazine, Life magazine, the big players of the time, and accompanying them um, are these really gruesome stories. Is he going to grow up and go to war? No, he's not going to grow up at all. And if another war comes, he and his mother and thousands upon thousands like them are going to die in action. Impossible, you say? They're non-combatants. Don't be silly. There'll be no such thing as non-combatants in the next war. And it goes on and on and on in this fictional narrative that is trying to really humanize uh, the aspects of war, and to bring it home and make it to draw on people's emotions and use what is really early propaganda in an anti-war fashion. Let's take a look at just a couple more of these because I think they're so fascinating. Um, just the bluntness of it. And these aren't, these ragtag fringe movement um, publications. These are getting sent out in major publications where everybody, the John Q public is going to be faced with these things. And I'm not going to get into all of these, but I'm not going to read it word for word. I expect you to inspect these a little bit further in the shared prezi uh, as we as I share that with you on the Google Classroom as well. So that'll offer you kind of a place to do a little bit of closer looking into these artworks. Now, the biggest protest poster movement comes from Berkeley, California, and the Bay Area and San Francisco. And a lot of this is influenced by Malachi Montoya. He was a Chicano artist in the Chicano art movement that was really, talking about Latino Americans and their contributions to society and things like that. He ended up teaching at Berkeley, and it was he had this huge influence on this poster movement. And what it is people, mainly students from the college, but even out in the community, that they're making these beautiful posters. Um, they're silk screening them, mass producing them. Silk screen really wasn't an art medium until you get to pop art, which would have been going on at the same time with Andy Warhol and all of the silk screening that he does. But it's really bringing a little bit of Art Nouveau influence into this with the kind of flowy letters and the natural iconography. But this hand drawn text is really kind of breaking out of everything that we saw with the 50s and uh, early 60s, and you think of like Mad Men advertising, things like that. Helvetica, very strong and clear cut, but here it's all very loose and flowy, that there is no given font, that the artists are making this on their own. And you're seeing the influence of, uh, the individual craftsman on the current art. So they're just cranking out these artworks. Okay, they are silk screening them on anything they can find. Cheap paper, cardboard. They're getting them out in the community. They're taking them across the country and putting them up in big cities and elsewhere. And it's becoming this, cool movement and this cool aesthetic that becomes this kind of psychedelic artwork, the psychedelic aesthetic. Now, these two were some of the more famous uh, Berkeley posters that really gained some traction. Here we see Uncle Sam, the green face. He looks sick. He's infected with some sort of illness that And it turns out, that it's this sickness of war that they're saying, that in his mouth, his teeth are the bombed out homes and the planes, and clouds of smoke or the bad breath emanating. And this is, end bad breath, end wars, that the country is sick and we're addicted uh, to war. And you've got to end it. This one, probably the most famous anti-war uh, slogan, if not poster. War is good business, invest your son. This we see done in a few different ways over the course of the Vietnam War. And it takes different iterations, this slogan. And you'll notice that these slogans are catchy. That's the point. They want to make these uh, posters, resonate a little bit. War is good business. Invest your son. This would have been seen on pins, posters. People would have quoted it in interviews. I think we even heard Howard Zinn mention this in his lecture. Okay, this is crazy. We're going to take a break while you watch the video on Classroom.